I'm not one to believe in the supernatural. I always thought things like ghosts and spirits were just stories people told to spook themselves. But what happened to me a few months ago changed everything. It was late, around 2 a.m., when I first noticed it. I'd been up all night working on some project for work, my eyes heavy with fatigue. My apartment is small, just a one-bedroom in a relatively quiet building. The kind of place you don't expect much to happen in. I was sitting on the couch, staring at my laptop screen when I heard it. A soft tapping sound. At first, I brushed it off. Could have been the neighbor upstairs, maybe a loose pipe or something else. But then it happened again. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it was much clearer, coming from somewhere behind me. I froze. I knew that the only thing behind me was the hallway that led to my bedroom. But I didn't hear any footsteps, nothing. Just that steady, rhythmic tapping. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't. The longer I sat there, the louder it seemed to get. It wasn't on the walls. It wasn't on the floor. It sounded like it was coming from the air, as strange as that sounds. It was as though something was knocking, not with hands, but with some unseen presence. My heart was pounding in my chest now. Grabbed my phone, too scared to turn around, but I texted my friend. I had to talk to someone. Anyone. "Hey, you awake?" I typed, then stared at the screen, waiting for the reply. It never came. I didn't hear my phone ding. No reply. Nothing. I glanced over at the screen, and that's when I saw it. The notification. One new text from a number I didn't recognize. It wasn't the message that freaked me out. It was the timestamp. It was from a few minutes ago, long before I'd sent my own message. I opened it hesitantly, expecting some spam. But what I saw made my blood run cold. "I'm right behind you." A chill crawled up my spine. I couldn't breathe for a second. I thought it was a joke, some sick prank, maybe from one of my friends. But no one knew my number except people I trusted. And this number, I didn't recognize it. The tapping had stopped for a brief moment, but my entire apartment suddenly felt off, empty, yet suffocating at the same time. I should have left then. I should have called someone, anything. But I didn't. Instead, I stood up and slowly made my way toward the hallway, hoping to find the source of the sound. The apartment was pitch dark, and the only light was from the flickering glow of my laptop, still open on the couch. I turned on the hallway light and stepped forward, the silence deafening. That's when I saw it. A shadow, moving at the far end of the hallway. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, thinking it was just my mind playing tricks on me from exhaustion. But no, the shadow was there, distinct and clear. Even in the dim light, it shifted unnaturally, like something not meant to move the way it was. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. Something kept me rooted to the spot. That tapping sound returned, but now it was more like dragging. Something was dragging across the floor, scraping against the wood, getting closer. I backed away into the living room, heart racing, desperate to flee. But I heard a voice, low, whispers. "You shouldn't have looked." It came from behind me, from the direction of the hallway. I spun around, my vision blurry, but there was nothing there. The hallway was empty, quiet and still, but the tapping had stopped. Instead, it was replaced by a loud, violent crash. I turned around and bolted to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. I collapsed on the bed, breathing heavily, trying to make sense of what was happening. I barely slept that night. In fact, I don't think I've had a full night's sleep since. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone on the floor, face down. When I picked it up, there was no trace of the message, No number in the inbox. The chat had vanished completely. But there was something else. My screensaver, the one with a picture of my family, had changed. The photo was still there, but something was different. There, standing in the back of the group, was a shadowy figure I hadn't noticed before. I still don't know who or what that was, but I know one thing for sure. It's still out there watching me. I haven't been able to get rid of the feeling that something is behind me. I've started hearing those tapping sounds again, late at night, and every time I check my phone, it's always there, the same number, the same message. I'm right behind you. And I can never shake the feeling that it's not just the tapping anymore. It's breathing, right in my ear. I've never been one to believe in the paranormal, but after what happened to me a few months ago, I'm not so sure anymore. I've tried to rationalize it, to explain it away as something logical, but deep down, I know what I saw. It all started one evening when I decided to stay home alone. My roommates had gone away for the weekend, and I was just looking forward to a quiet night in. I live in a small, older apartment in a fairly quiet neighborhood. It's a place I've grown to love, but sometimes there's this odd feeling in the air, like the walls are just a little too thin, like someone might be listening. I was lying on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a soft noise. At first, I thought it was the wind, maybe the trees brushing against the window. But then I heard it again, a faint, almost inaudible tapping. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere inside the apartment, but I couldn't figure out where. My heart started to race, and I sat up, straining to listen. The sound didn't stop. I got up and walked to the kitchen, thinking maybe it was just the pipes or something mundane like that. But as I stood there, staring at the empty room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The tapping was still there, and it seemed to be getting closer. I walked into the hallway, but there was nothing. No one else in the apartment. I even checked the bathroom, convinced I was just hearing things. I turned off all the lights to try to clear my head. Maybe it was just me overthinking it. I sat in the dark for a while, and that's when it happened. From somewhere near the back of the apartment, I heard a door creak open. I froze. My stomach dropped. The apartment has a set of old, heavy wooden doors that often make strange sounds. But this wasn't the same. This wasn't the wind or the house settling. This sounded like something, or someone, had opened it deliberately. The door to my bedroom. The room I was sure I had locked before sitting down. I couldn't move. I just stood there in the dark, listening, waiting for something else to happen. And then I heard it. A faint whisper. It wasn't clear, just a soft, unintelligible murmur. But it sent a chill down my spine. My mind screamed at me to get out, but my legs wouldn't move. The whisper came again, louder this time, and I could have sworn I heard my name. I finally snapped out of it and rushed to my bedroom. I swung open the door, half expecting to see someone standing there, but there was no one. The room was completely empty. The window was shut. I checked the closet. Nothing. But that's when I saw it. There, sitting on the bed, was my phone. My unlocked phone. And there, on the screen, was a message. It was from me. The message read, "Why are you still here?" I must have stared at the screen for a solid minute, trying to make sense of it. How could this be? I hadn't touched my phone in hours. It wasn't possible. I immediately called my roommate, even though I knew it was a ridiculous thing to do. She didn't pick up. I left a voicemail, but when I went to hang up, something caught my eye. The door to my bedroom, which I had clearly closed behind me, was slowly creaking open again, not by much, just enough to make a sliver of darkness in the doorway. I didn't hear footsteps, but I could feel the presence there. I grabbed my phone and bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me. The rest of the night, I stayed in the living room, locked all the doors, and just kept checking over my shoulder, hoping whatever it was wouldn't come any closer. The next morning, I woke up to find the front door wide open. I swear I had locked it the night before. I looked outside, and there was nothing. No sign of anyone or anything out of place. But there was a note on the doorstep. It simply said, "We know you're here." I didn't stay in the apartment much longer after that. I stayed with a friend for a while, and when I returned, everything seemed normal, almost too normal. But I still hear that tapping sometimes. Every once in a while, in the dead of night, I'll wake up to hear it. A soft, rhythmic sound, always coming from somewhere inside. It's never stopped. I still can't explain what happened that night, but I know it wasn't a dream. It felt too real, too intense. And no matter how much I try to rationalize it, I can't shake the feeling that something was in that house with me. It all started when I moved into the old house on Oak Street. It wasn't much, just a cheap 2-story place on the outskirts of town. But it was all I could afford at the time. The place was a bit run down, sure, but nothing unusual for a house that hadn't been occupied in years. I figured it was just a few creaks and groans from age. At first, nothing out of the ordinary happened. The house was silent at night, almost too silent. But then, after a few weeks, I started noticing things. Small things at first. A door that was slightly ajar when I could have sworn I'd closed it. The sound of footsteps on the second floor when I was the only one home. It wasn't constant, so I chalked it up to imagination, or maybe the house settling. But then it got worse. One night, I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I heard it. A soft whisper. It came from downstairs, like someone was talking just out of reach. I froze, trying to listen, but the voice was too faint to make out any words. I told myself it was just the wind, but then the whispering turned into a low, guttural growl. I shot up in bed, my heart racing. I wasn't sure if I should go check it out, but something about that growl made me feel paralyzed. I waited in silence, my ears straining. And then, as if the air itself shifted, I heard it. A heavy thud, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming up the stairs. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, too afraid to move, too afraid to even breathe. My body was frozen in terror. The footsteps came closer, and then they stopped right outside my bedroom door. I don't remember how long it stayed like that. Me staring at the door, waiting for it to open, or for whatever it was on the other side to do something. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the footsteps retreated. I waited a few minutes, then bolted out of bed, not wanting to waste another second. I grabbed my phone, trying to convince myself to call someone. Anyone. But who would believe me? The logical part of my brain told me to leave the house, but I couldn't afford to move again. So I stayed. The next few nights were even worse. I could hear the whispering more clearly now, almost like it was circling the house. The temperature would drop in certain rooms, and I'd feel a cold breath on the back of my neck. The worst part, I wasn't alone in the house anymore. I started to see it. The shadow. It was always just out of the corner of my eye. A tall, dark shape that seemed to follow me around, lurking in the hallways, standing just beyond the light. The first time I saw it fully, I was coming out of the bathroom. It was standing at the foot of the stairs, its features obscured by the shadows, but the way it moved, it wasn't human. It jerked unnaturally, like it was glitching in and out of existence. My stomach dropped. I couldn't even scream. I just ran. The next morning, I found something that shook me to my core. A message written on the bathroom mirror in what looked like smudged, wet fingerprints. It read, "Leave now." I packed my bags that day. No amount of rent money was worth staying there. I didn't care how many friends or relatives thought I was being paranoid. I was done. But as I walked out of the house for the last time, I heard the same thing I'd heard before. The whispering, the footsteps. Only this time, it wasn't coming from inside. It was coming from the attic. I never went back. I don't know what was in that house, and I don't want to know. The worst part is, I've heard similar stories from people who've moved in since me. A few months ago, I heard a friend of a friend had taken over the place. They didn't last a week. The thing is, I still hear it sometimes. The whispering, the footsteps. Late at night, when the house is too quiet, I'll hear it in my own apartment. I've never felt it physically, but I know it's there, watching, waiting. I'm not sure if it's because I lived there, or if it's following me. But every time I feel that chill on my neck, I know that whatever was in that house, it's still with me.